Okay, the potatoes are back. So here we are, my thoughts on Doctor Who Series 13 Flux Episode 2, War of the Sontarans. Well, right off the bat, this is quite possibly one of the top best ever episodes of the Chibnall era. I know the general consensus is that that's not a very high bar to have set, but regardless though, I still think that was one of the best episodes we've had in years. I like all the Sontaran stories really, but I think this one definitely has some really good strong points to it that I think stand out. Yeah, in terms of characters, the Doctor was brilliant in this, one of Jodie's best performances as her incarnation. Yaz was kind of shoved off to the side to do some stuff to set up the next episode, which I assume ties in with the overarching story. Judging by the next time trailer, it certainly looks that way. But we'll get to a bit more on that in a few minutes. But yeah, this was really a good opportunity to let Dan's character shine. John Bishop's character Dan, he was on point in this one. He just brings a brilliant air of comedy to the episode. Like, most of his jokes are actually really funny, and he's just such a likeable character. I didn't expect his parents to show up as well. It's just like the whole trio of them just make this like really funny little comedy act when they're together. Got a little bit more time with Vinder. We're still not really sure what the deal with him is, or the reason that he's part of this big story arc in the first place. But hopefully as we go on with these next 4 episodes, they'll start to bring him more centre stage and we'll actually get a good reason to care about him. I think it was nice that Carvanista showed up again. They haven't forgotten about him, given how this is supposed to be one big long 6-episode story arc this time. Nice that he came back in, and I think the chemistry that Dan and Carvanista have is just really, really funny. You know, it just works really well. All the character stuff was written really well. I like how they got Mary Seacole in it. Another historical figure they've never, to my knowledge, had in an episode of Doctor Who before, unless she's been used in some expanded media content. Now, this is a historical that doesn't really do a whole lot with the historical setting. I mean, it does a fair bit with the historical setting with the battle between Sontarans and the British Army and all that, but it's not the kind of historical that sort of delves in and tries to sort of teach you, shall we say, about the historical figure and the events that they're currently setting the story in, you know? It's more akin to the pseudo-historicals that cropped up around sort of middle of the Troughton era, or, you know, more in the sort of Pertwee era, should we say, that happened. It's more akin to the pseudo-historicals, which were actually kind of started by the Time Warrior, the first Sontaran story in a way. And speaking of the Time Warrior, I loved it when the main Sontaran, I can't remember his name, but the main Sontaran general in this episode, I love it when he went and referenced links to Sontaran from the Time Warrior. I love that. Big fanboy moment. Oh, thank you, Chibnall. And yeah, you continued with the Sontaran's brilliant little scene in the end of the last episode, and they really blew it out of the park with this one. These are definitely the best portrayals of Sontarans I think we've ever had, going to be honest, and that includes classic Who, New Who, and everything in between. Yeah, and speaking of the Sontarans, I think this is like the perfect way to do them. They were like perfect balance between comedy villains and actual like threatening bad guys in this. So many good little moments with the Sontarans where they're like actually like threatening, and they're like killing people and all that lot. They're being brutal, which is kind of their thing. And then at a few other points that sort of balances it out with the comedy, like the Sontaran that was being treated by Mary Seacole. Just like the whole scene there is, you know, it's just pure Sontaran tomfoolery, and I loved it. And then some of the lines that the Doctor has with the main General Sontaran, where it's like, take off your helmet. Oh, and second thoughts, keep it on. And I think my absolute favourite line, or favourite moment in this episode, in terms of Sontaran scenes at least, is the one where the Sontaran general is going like, this planet is a strategic, is a perfect strategic whatever, etc. Whatever it was that he said. He's spouting off all that stuff about how Earth is like suitable to be a Sontaran outpost, and then right at the end he's just like, and I wanted to ride a horse. I don't think I've ever laughed so much at a Doctor Who line in quite a while, gonna be honest. That just came so out of nowhere that like I can kind of believe it, because the Sontarans are like semi-comedy villains in a way. It's brilliant. I love the portrayal of the Sontarans in this. I'm just like, wow. There was a couple of jarring moments that I sort of noted early on in the episode, or at least one. One thing that really bugged me early on was the pre-title sequence, which starts with them, like, once they've sort of got themselves oriented and they know where they are, and they meet Mary Seacole and all the Sontarans show up on horseback and everything. It looks like the Sontarans have cornered them, and the way the dialogue was, I could be wrong, but it sounds like they were talking directly to the Doctor and the companions and Mary. Then we cut to after the title sequence, and suddenly they just managed to get away all of a sudden. It's like there's like a throwaway line where the Doctor's like, "Oh, thanks for taking us through that secret route to get out of there," and then they're back at the base camp, and did I miss something there? That seems kind of jarring. I'm not sure how we went from that scene to that scene. Maybe I'm just misremembering, I don't know, but that kind of confused me a bit, but apart from that, everything else is pretty much on point, to be honest. We also get some more stuff with the TARDIS breaking down. It looks like the TARDIS is going to get worse and worse every episode, it seems, which is really interesting. But yeah, from a story perspective, like I said last time, it's really interesting to have the TARDIS get progressively more broken down as each episode goes on, so interested to see where that goes. Yeah, just overall the whole Sontaran side of this story I think was really good. Not a whole lot of criticisms that I have of it, not a lot of nitpicks. I just think it was a genuinely fun, enjoyable Sontaran story, which is something we've really been wanting since 2008, you know? Okay, now let's talk about some of the more, or should we say the side plot in this episode, which is obviously going to tie into the main story arc and is obviously setting up next episode. So, the Temple of Atropos, housing the Mori on the planet Time. A lot of new elements introduced there, but I feel like a lot of them could potentially have roots in already established Doctor Who lore. Now I'm really intrigued with this whole Temple of Atropos angle of the story. So obviously we have this ancient temple with these creatures, like these women in this like circle, sort of like these life forms that have sort of given up their lives to keep time in check via this big machine on this planet called Time. That's a lot to take in, gonna be honest. Obviously a planet called Time in a show like Doctor Who is going to have some big implications, so there's obviously something going on there. There's a lot to digest there. Obviously Swarm and Azure show up to sort of wreck shit shortly after Yaz and Vinda end up there. Along with this new guy, this big like thug guy in the mask, who was leaked quite a few months ago. They saw him filming in some city somewhere, I can't remember, I think it was Liverpool. But yeah, the big buff guy who's, they only refer to him as Passenger, so that's going to be interesting. I don't know what he's about, whether he's some kind of like hired bodyguard or whether he has a more prominent role to play as the series goes on, we don't know yet. Swarm and Azure keep alluding to something really important having happened at this temple a long time ago. Yeah, I'd be surprised if that didn't tie into the overarching story this series, to be honest. Now, there's a few things I kind of want to just throw out there in terms of speculation. Some of it might be a bit wild and out there, but I'm going to say it anyway because my brain, my thoughts, my video, my channel, damn it. Obviously we don't know much about it, but of course the Temple of Atropos and the Mori have some kind of big role to play in keeping time in check, and apparently there's some big thing going on with time. But yeah, so they must be some kind of ancient thing that was set up a while ago. Now, what I'm wondering is, if you weren't aware, in the expanded universe there are some stories. A lot of it's not really that well known in the general Doctor Who fandom, but there's a lot of stuff about how in the Dark Time, right at the beginning of the universe, there was just chaos, there was no time or order, and then at some point someone, presumably Rassilon, in the process of founding Time Lord Society, he did these like big cosmic actions like across the universe that sort of bound the universe together and made it what it is today. So like time runs forwards, there's order, there's like no more chaos. So yeah, there was a lot of stuff to do with that, and the way they're talking about these Mori in this temple being the keepers of time, or keeping time in check, or whatever it was that they said, that gives me big vibes that remind me of that other thing that I just mentioned. Sorry. But yeah, there does seem to be a lot of similarities, at least in my mind, between what we're seeing in this series and the expanded universe content to do with the ordering of the universe. That's just a connection that I made in my head while watching anyway. Obviously, Doctor Who, the TV series, has a long history of flat out ignoring pretty much anything that's ever happened in the expanded media. I can kind of get where they're coming from with that decision though. They don't want to alienate viewers who purely just watch the TV series. But yeah, that's just an observation that I made. Chibnall does like a lot of lore-heavy stuff at times, so I wouldn't be surprised if he was at least taking parts of the expanded universe and sort of repurposing them for the official TV canon perhaps. Yeah, there's just a lot of unanswered questions that we have currently and a lot of fan speculation that doesn't have a lot of solid ground to work on, but I'm going to speculate regardless. Also, side note, the guy that was in the scenes in episode 1 that was set in 1820, he shows up for like one scene in the temple and then disappears. That's kind of mysterious. He seems to be talking about or rambling about some things not working. So yeah, I'm wondering what kind of connection this guy from 1820 who's building something in these tunnels has to this temple. I'll have to wait and see what happens with him. Yeah, one more thing before we get into speculation about the next episode, because I have a few thoughts on that. The black and white flashback scene right at the beginning of the episode where the Doctor is standing before that sort of big messed up floating house. Now that could either be something to do with Azure trapping the one-armed woman from episode 1 that Dan was talking with in that house, which we saw. That could be something to do with that, because there's like a haunted house vibe going on there. Or, the thing that I thought of immediately, and I've seen a few other people online, like Reddit, mention as well, is Long Barrow. If you're not familiar, Long Barrow is this big sort of massive story. It's basically like the finale to all of classic Doctor Who, as Samuel Davis put it on his channel once. Essentially, it's the book from the Virgin New Adventures range. It's like the very last or second to last book in the VNA range. It basically ties together like everything that they could think of in the classic series that was like a plot thread, basically. I haven't read it myself, but I've heard a lot about it. It takes place on Gallifrey, and it like explores the Doctor's past on that planet, like the Gallifreyan house he came from, which was called Long Barrow. And yeah, it's just like, it's basically the culmination of what the Cartmel master plan ended up evolving into, basically. It's like, there's like a whole like decade-long history behind it, sort of thing, and I'm not going to go into it too much here. But the one thing I thought when I saw that house in that black and white flashback was Long Barrow, and I don't know why. It probably isn't that, let's be honest, it probably isn't. I don't think they would really bring something as lore-changing or more heavy as the Long Barrow arc into the main series, because then, unless they do a really good job of explaining it and giving it a lot of backstory, which probably wouldn't work anyway, given how big the arc is, yeah, I don't think they would want to alienate fans of the TV show by forcing them to go back and read a rather hit and miss 60 book long series from the 90s. But yeah, that's just some like wild sort of speculation on my part as a bit of a fanboy, you know. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see what comes from that particular aspect of the story. A little bit of speculation now on my part before we end, based on the trailer for episode 3, Once Upon Time. I think this next episode is going to dive into a lot of backstory on the Division. Judging by the fact that some of the characters in that trailer are seen with the Division's sort of energy rifles, and a few other characters that look like they're in uniforms that I think could be Division members. So it looks like they're going to delve into that story arc element a bit earlier than I thought they would this series. Yeah, that's pretty much everything I had in my little thought box that I call my brain about this episode at the current time. Really loved this episode, really enjoyable, brilliant Sontaran story, and I'm really intrigued about the stuff to do with the Temple of Atropos as well. That's going to lead into the next episode. We'll see if any of my sort of speculations about the Division come true in the next episode. I'm 99% sure that the next episode will start delving into the story arc a lot more. Also, we get to see Cybermen come back apparently, so that's cool. So yeah, there was my scrambled thoughts on Doctor Who Series 13, Episode 2, War of the Sontarans. Loving this series so far. It's a massive step up from Series 11 and 12, even though I quite enjoyed those two series. I think this probably will go down as the best series of this particular era, that's for sure. So, that was the video for today. Feel free to leave your thoughts on this episode down in the comments below. Leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you haven't already. I'll be back roughly the same time next week for my thoughts on episode 3, Once Upon Time. And have a good day or night whenever you're watching this. And try not to get hit by a bus or anything on your way back from school or work today or anything like that. And I'll hopefully see you in the next video. Bye friends, bye!